Great honor to invite Dr. Monica for the next session. She's a very popular gastroenterologist of her area, and presently she's chief of gastroenterology and hepatology at Shri Balaji Action Medical Institute, Delhi. She was an ex-faculty at Jeevanth Hospital. She has more than 30 publications, national and international. Despite her great career, the biggest achievement is whenever we refer patient to Monica, patient always come back to us to say, thank you, doctor, that you referred me to such a nice doctor. And it's a great compliment for any doctor, and that's Monica Jain. So I have invited. We shall be talking on serological markers in GIT disorders, which is so relevant to all of us. And I request Monica to proceed. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Dr. Hemant, for the kind words. So the session which I am going to speak on, that is a biomarker or serological markers. So biomarkers are very important in clinical practice in gastroenterology because we have number of diseases in which we take help of these markers in addition to our clinical and endoscopic findings. To begin with, the first disease in which the biomarkers are important is inflammatory bowel disease. This is a lifelong disease with waxing and waning character. Patient gets frequent exacerbations, and the subclassification of inflammatory bowel disease includes Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, indeterminate colitis. What is indeterminate colitis? When features do not fit in either pure Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. The incidence of inflammatory bowel disease is increasing, and nowadays this is a very important health issue. When we were studying in our MBBS MD days, then it was thought to be a disease of West, but presently we have a big health burden in our country also. This is a lifetime disease, and the lifetime requirement for surgery in ulcerative colitis as well as in Crohn's disease is to tune of 5 to 15% versus 80%. We require more surgeries in Crohn's disease due to the complications. So the accurate diagnosis and subtyping to make it exact the diagnosis is very important when we want to start the therapy. And at present, there is no single gold standard marker which can diagnose or subclassify inflammatory bowel disease. Presently, how do we diagnose? If we don't use biomarkers, how do we diagnose and subclassify? We depend on mainly symptomatology, lab testing, radiological investigations, the most important endoscopy, and the histopathological examination. But when the patient requires repeated endoscopies, what are the drawbacks? This is uncomfortable, the cost is an issue in our country, and sometimes in complicated cases, the risk of perforation is there. As a non-invasive marker, we have MR enterography, but again, this can although show transmural involvement of the bowel, but to the cost of this particular investigation is also very high. So in given outline, whenever we want to treat a patient, how do we treat? Whenever a patient comes with acute exacerbation of inflammatory bowel disease, we give different drugs to induce remission, and then the patient requires maintenance therapy to so that the next exacerbation is not happening. We have a long list of drugs which can be used in patients with inflammatory bowel disease. I will not go in detail. Importance of telling that these are the number of drugs which we have a big basket of drugs. Why do we need a marker? We need a serological marker for accurate diagnosis of inflammatory bowel disease because to know the activity the clinical activity. It's sometimes difficult to differentiate ulcerative colitis from Crohn's disease, that is known as indeterminate colitis. In that case, we can take help of these inflammatory markers. In our country, where tuberculosis is so common, in many of time the patient comes with features suggestive of inflammatory bowel disease in the form of bloody diarrhea, pain, abdomen, fever, low-grade fever, and features of obstruction. And we do, when we do colonoscopy, the picture resembles tuberculosis. Hello? The picture resembles...
Dr. Mondal, you can please, Monica, please hold on. Dr. Mondal, can you please... Yes, fine.
Yes, Dr. Hemant?
Monica, carry on.
To differentiate Crohn's disease from tuberculosis sometimes is so difficult that in most of the cases when we have some doubt, then we start the patient on anti-tubercular therapy for 2 months and we repeat the colonoscopic examination to see if there is endoscopic healing or not. Then we start the therapy of Crohn's disease. Also, to know the objective assessment of disease severity, extent of disease activity, and how the disease is going to behave in future. If we have some marker to assess that, that is important. To monitor the response of a particular therapy, we have long list of drugs. If we have some marker to say that this particular patient is going to respond to steroid, or this will respond to infliximab or other group of drugs, so that will be very helpful. And unnecessary putting the patient on one group of drugs which is very harmful for him. If we know beforehand that this patient will respond to this particular drug, we can help the patient, and unnecessary steroid or other drugs can be avoided in that patient. What should be the ideal biomarker? It should be non-invasive. The sensitivity should be high. It should be disease specific, easy to perform, and the cost remains the issue in our country always. What are the biomarkers in inflammatory bowel disease? We have classical biomarkers which are available is p-ENCA, ESCA, and CRP, and we have a lot of newer markers which are coming up. We have antibodies against exocrine pancreas. We have antimicrobial antibodies. We have non-coding RNAs. Cytokines can be measured now, metabolomics and proteomics. These are coming up areas which have a lot of potential in future in telling about the inflammatory bowel disease. So what are the origins? How the biomarker arises? We have antibodies. Basically, we have antibodies. This is an autoimmune disorder in which a patient can have antibodies against different antigens. We have different genetic materials in the form of microRNAs and long non-coding RNAs, which leads to inflammatory mediators in the form of CRP and cytokines. There are changes in the proteins in patients with inflammatory bowel disease, which is known as proteomics. We have different markers to assess that this particular patient is going to have complications in the form of fibrosis, stretch ring, or fistulas. So extra growth factors, they also can be measured. And the metabolic derangements have been seen in patients with inflammatory bowel disease as compared to controls. So there is a long list of different markers origin, but what important markers we are using in our clinical practice is, first is a p-ENCA. This is perinuclear anti-neutrophilic cytoplasmic antibody. This reacts to the lysosomal enzymes in the cytoplasm of neutrophils and monocyte. What are the uses of this? This particular antibody is basically we say this is a UC antibody or ulcerative colitis antibody. This can help us in differentiating Crohn's disease from ulcerative colitis. Titers of p-ENCA changes with the disease activity. So indirectly, we can say the titers are increasing, that the activity of this particular disease is increasing. Titers, they increase in patients with some of the patients for Crohn's disease who have ulcerative colitis like features. So this is a basically ulcerative colitis antibody. It has been seen in 60 to 70% patients of ulcerative colitis as compared to 10 to 15% in Crohn's disease. It can when we have colitis of other causes, then this particular antibodies is seen in less than 5%. That means it has got a negative predictive value also. And 25% of patients with Crohn's disease who have predominantly left-sided colitis, this can be detected. So overall, p-ANCA is a antibody of ulcerative colitis. Now we have another antibody, anti-PR3. That means neutrophilic proteinases 3 antibodies. This also has a positive predictive positivity in 15 to 40% of ulcerative colitis versus 10% in Crohn's disease. This antibody is not generally used in clinical practice because this particular assay is not routinely done. It is done only in experimental or study protocols. What is the drawback of this particular antibody? This has got low sensitivity. If we want to know a person who has normal gut versus ulcerative colitis, then the pickup rate is not very high. The second comes the anti-Saccharomyces cerevisiae antibody, ESCA. So ESCA, these are antibodies to the mannan protein of Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This has got high sensitivity, but specificity and low sensitivity. Basically, we call this antibody as a Crohn's disease antibody because this antibody is positive in more cases of Crohn's disease as compared to ulcerative colitis. And this is again also a marker of early disease onset. When the disease starts at earlier age, this marker is positive. When this is positive, fibrostenotic complications in the form of obstruction, they are more. And the fistulizing disease, that means internal fistulas, are seen in patients who have high level of these anti-ESCA. IgG ESCA positivity rate is seen more in Crohn's in 60 to 70% of Crohn's as compared to 10 to 15% of ulcerative colitis. This can also differentiate IBD patients from non-IBD colitis also. Less than 5% of non-IBD, they have this. There is a drawback of this particular antibody. This antibody has got a lower expression in certain ethnic group. Like in Asian Crohn's disease patient, these antibodies are not seen. So if a patient comes and we get this antibody done and the levels are low, then we cannot say that this patient is not having Crohn's disease. We need to see other clinical, endoscopic or biopsy findings in that particular patient. If we combine ANCA and ESCA, the specificity increases much more. So this is seen that there is a meta-analysis of 60 studies in which when a patient is ESCA positive, ANCA negative, the Crohn's disease, the chances are 92%. If patient is having ANCA positive, ESCA negative, the chances of ulcerative colitis is 94%. So ANCA is a marker for ulcerative colitis, ESCA is a marker for Crohn's disease. There are newer antibodies which are coming up against exocrine pancreas, which are commonly known as PAPs. They include anti-GP2 and other antibodies. These are all again experimental because there are number of studies in which these antibodies have been linked to ileal inflammation only, and patients with exclusive colonic Crohn's disease, they have low titers of anti-GP2. There are major zymogen GP2 antibodies which are seen in patients with Crohn's disease. So all these there are a number of papers coming up on these antibodies, but the unfortunate part is clinically we don't have these antibodies measurements. So future is there. Whenever we will have these antibodies available clinically, they are going to help us in different defining the different subgroups of the patients of inflammatory bowel disease. We have anti-GCSF antibody, anti-phospholipid antibody, anti-chitinase antibody. So so many antibodies are there, and they have been linked to different types of subtyping of inflammatory bowel disease, and they will be probably available in future. Let's see which all are there. Then comes the CRP. CRP is a very commonly available test which is simple to perform. This helps in differentiating mucosal active inflammation from quiescent inflammatory bowel. The normal level is less than 10, this is nanogram per liter, indicates that means the person is having remission, and the disease activity and recurrence, whenever the person has recurrence, generally the CRP level increases. The drawback of this particular antibodies, this is a non-specific marker. Maybe normal in mild diseases. We cannot subgroup the patient into Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, and this is not found to be useful in pediatric population. Next comes a fecal calprotectin. This is another marker which is now commercially available. This is a protein heterodimer released by granulocyte, monocyte, and macrophages. This can be measured by ELISA method. The sensitivity and specificity of this particular marker is very high. In inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, we need to when to treat, when to predict the response to interferon, and to identify at high risk of clinical relapse. This can be done by fecal calprotectin. Some of the non-inflammatory bowel disease like IBS, microscopic colitis, acute gastroenteritis, C. difficile infection, in which sometimes the endoscopic findings are the same as of IBD. In those cases, if we get a fecal calprotectin, then sometimes that gives us an idea of that this is IBD or non-inflammatory bowel disease. Colorectal cancer, the role it has been seen in diverticular disease, celiac disease. Vitamin D has been found to be related with basically this is an immune modulator, and its low level has been related with anti-TNF treatment failure. The CRP, PNK positivity, negative PN, high CRP level tells us that this particular patient is going to respond to infliximab, and PNK positivity is associated with low response to interferon therapy, infliximab therapy. Negative PNK, so all these are important to know that these markers, if we get it done beforehand, then we can say that this particular patient will require this therapy, and it's best to start first as a first-line therapy. The futuristic other markers are coming up in a big way. We have circulating non-coding RNAs, which have shown their role in inflammatory bowel disease. There are two types of RNAs, microRNAs and long non-coding RNAs. Their expression has been shown to they can negatively show the expression at the post-transcriptional level. So various miRNA or microRNAs have been associated. We can subtype these RNAs, we can subdefine them, and which have been associated in diagnosis of IBD, subtyping of IBD, to know the disease activity and to know the complications. We have long non-coding RNAs also. They have also been seen to be involved in the process of these inflammatory bowel disease as compared to healthy controls. So different RNAs, I will not go into details. The different RNAs have been subdefined and they have been shown to be associated with different subvarieties of IBD and its complications. Now, a word about metabolomics. What is metabolomics? Basically, now there is a lot of work coming up in inflammatory bowel disease in which gut microbiota has been incriminated as a pathophysiological important marker. Whenever there is interaction between host and gut microbiota and there is some disturbance in that profile, the different metabolic products are produced which can be measured by using mass spectroscopy or chromatography, in which the serum profile level of different amino acid, tricarboxylic acid, TCA cycle, they all can be measured. And we can tell by measuring these metabolites that this particular patient is having IBD or likely to have IBD in future, that can be predicted. Next is the proteomics. Proteomics means protein expression in response to a stimulus. So different proteins have been assessed in inflammatory bowel disease like platelet aggregating factor 4, hepatoglobulin A2, fibrinopeptide A, myeloid related protein. So by knowing a different group of or a combo, if we calculate or assess the different proteins, then we can tell that this particular patient is going to have IBD or has IBD or is having likely to have complications and likely to have the therapeutic response to a particular drug. So a lot of new trials are going on in this particular field. Lastly, pro-inflammatory cytokines are also can be measured, interleukin 1 beta, TNF CRP ratio. So many new things are coming up in which we can say that we have monitor test in which different types of 13 different serum proteins are measured, and we can say that this particular patient is going to have so much of inflammation and how much he is going to respond. Ulcerative colitis response index is also there depending on these protein measurements. So next, finally comes these again. We have now markers for intestinal fibrosis also, that this particular Crohn's disease patient will have strictures or complications like fistulas. They all can be measured in the form of extracellular matrix component, which can be measured. Growth factors can be measured. MicroRNAs can be measured as a marker of intestinal fibrosis. So, summarizing in inflammatory bowel disease, we have 4 markers. One is a PNCAR, the second is a PSCAR, third is a CRP, and fourth is a fecal calprotectin, which are available commercially, and we can make use of them along with our clinical, endoscopic, and histopathological findings to say that this is inflammatory bowel disease and what are the modes of treatment and how much the patient is going to have complication and how the patient will respond to these therapies. Rest of the markers which I have enumerated, they are futuristic, they are available but not in clinical practice. The second comes in celiac disease. Again, it's a very common clinical condition, very difficult, not thought to be rare in our country, but now almost we diagnose this particular disease every week. It's a systemic autoimmune disease in which there is autoimmunity against gluten protein. So it is a major health problem globally, around 0.7% of global population. So you can imagine how many patients are there globally. Almost the unfortunate part is more than 50% of these patients are asymptomatic. So we need to suspect and we need to get the biomarkers, and till now there are no gold standard marker to diagnose. We require newer markers to know the various aspects of disease pathophysiology. The first marker which came in celiac disease was anti-gliadin antibody. This was a non-specific marker. To supplement it, next came anti-endomysial antibody. So combining these two, we had a good sensitivity and specificity. This was further improved by presence of anti-tissue transglutaminase, anti-TTG, very commonly known as. Now we can subfraction them as TG2, TG6, TG3. Next in line came deamidated gliadin peptide, DGP, and nowadays a very commercial available new epitope is there, TTG DGP complex. These are the serological markers. Then comes the genetic marker in which we assess the HLA-DQ haplotyping. Can we have some markers other than biopsy to know how much is the damage inside the intestine? That is the prediction of enteropathy. We have cytochrome P450 3A4 level. We have plasma citrulline level, which can be measured now. We have this marker is available commercially. We have intestinal FABP, fatty acid binding proteins, which can be assessed. Another marker is regenerating gene 1 alpha. Can we tell a patient who is put on gluten-free diet that he is adhering to that diet or not? Till now, what we do in our clinical practice, we get these anti-TTG levels done, and we do repeated intestinal biopsy to know how much is the healing in the Bill's pattern of the intestine. But non-invasive marker, now we have gluten immunogenic peptide, GIP can be measured, and indirectly we get some information by knowing the mean platelet volume. So miscellaneous, again, we have role of microRNAs, which can tell us about the intestinal permeability. So the currently available markers are IgA variety of TTG and IgA variety of anti-endomysial antibodies. We combine this with the IgG variety of anti-deaminated gliadin peptide. When we combine all these three, the sensitivity and specificity increases. In adults, the positive serology is mostly combined with histopathological examination. Although it has been said in children that anti-TTG level, if this is more than 10 times upper limit of normal with positive anti-endomysial, there is no need of histopathology. But in clinical practice, when we tell the parents that this particular child is having gluten sensitivity, they ask us 100 times that, are you sure that you are what you are saying is correct? So in that case, we need to get a histopathology also done to document, yes, this is the clear-cut case of celiac disease and the patient has to go on gluten-free diet lifelong. What are the current drawbacks that of these markers? If we only go by markers, we have false positivity in many autoimmune diseases, and most of the markers are IgA dependent. So if the child or if a person is IgA deficient, then these markers are not going to be increased. So that's why we combine IgG, TTG, IgA and anti-gliadin IgG. So by combining one IgA response and other IgG response, we can say that this particular, we try to combat that IgA deficiency. And in case of children, generally, we get a IgA level also done along with these markers. These markers cannot tell us about how much is the small intestinal damage, because these markers, they appear late when the injury is more. So early diagnosis is sometimes not possible by these markers. We cannot measure adherence to gluten-free diet, and we cannot predict the comorbidity and complications, because celiac disease is a sort of pre-malignant condition. In few cases, these patients, they develop lymphomas in future. So we cannot predict that also. And how to evaluate response to therapy, that also cannot be done by these markers at present. The newer markers, again in this, we have a lot of cytokines, chemokines, IL-4, 10, 11, all these markers, they have been measured. They are correlated with villus atrophy also. Few of the markers, they have been correlated with the adherence to gluten-free diet. And we have gluten-specific T cells, which are also measured in patients with celiac disease. Role of HLA is also there when we don't have any diagnosis. We cannot say that this particular child is having celiac disease. In case of confusion, we get these HLAs also done. We now can measure cell surface markers in form of CD38, CD8, gamma. All these are experimental, and we don't have these markers available clinically. The circulating microRNAs again has been documented in, they have a role in diagnosis as well as defining the patients with sub-defining the patients of celiac disease, but still not available clinically. The different microbiomes, again the microbiota has been defined in patients with celiac disease. It is seen that the bifidobacterium and lactobacillus are decreased, whereas proteobacteria are more in celiac disease. So by knowing these gut microbiome, we can say that this particular patient may develop celiac disease in future. There are certain protective viruses have been defined in patients which are protective for development of celiac disease in the form of rubella, Epstein-Barr virus, CMV, HSV. The correlation has been seen, and there are certain viral diseases which have been correlated with the future development of celiac disease in the form of rotavirus, hepatitis C, B. So by knowing the gut microbiome and overall by knowing different studies have been there, which can tell us that this child is going to develop celiac disease in future. Similarly, lipid and lipid processing genes are also has been seen as a marker for celiac disease. Citrulline is available clinically, in which we can tell us that small intestine enterocytes are damaged and their level can be measured to know that how much is the damage. We have another CYP3A4 metabolization as a marker for mucosal damage. This is not available clinically. Citrulline, we have a clinically, we get it done. Now this will be, I think, commercially available in future. Intestinal permeability can also be measured. These are again futuristic things which are coming up in celiac disease. Adherence to gluten-free diet can also be measured by immunogenic gluten peptide, in which can be measured. GIP level can be measured in feces, serum, and urine. Dietary lepsis can be measured, and we have certain TTG subfractioning. This is a new concept that TTG3 type has been seen to be related to dermatitis herpetiformis, and anti-TTG6 has been linked to the neurological manifestation in the form of ataxia. So ultimately, we have again transcription cryptonomic studies in which small intestinal biopsies can be this RNA sequencing can be done in the biopsies. The future prospects is that mucosal damage, what we want in celiac disease, we should be able to diagnose these patients at an early stage. We should be able to tell the patients who will develop celiac disease in future and how much their relatives are going to develop this problem and how much complications this particular person will have and what other immunological manifestation the person is going to have. All these can be, if can be assessed by biomarkers, it will be of great help. Intestinal third is condition is intestinal ischemia, a very vascular in which it's a basically GI emergency in which whenever there is thrombosis or non-occlusive obstruction to the blood vessel, the intestine become ischemic and the patient has got very high mortality even in spite of early diagnosis. So early diagnosis is very important in these cases because once necrosis occurs, once the ischemic bowel becomes dead, then even after surgery, the results are very low, results are very bad, and the patient may lose large amount of bowel, and short gut bowel is syndrome is very common in these patients. There is none of the classical marker has got good accuracy to diagnose this problem. The classical biomarkers are lactate level, LDH, TLC, high base excess, and D-lactate level. The emerging newer markers are procalcitonin, beam dimer, and there is another new marker which is ischemia modified albumin IMA, endothelin 1, FABP, and GST. So procalcitonin, which is a marker which is coming up in intestinal ischemia, released by liver parenchyma. This is a marker of intestinal necrotic damage. The sensitivity and specificity is very high. The TLC is very easy to get it done, raised in bowel ischemia, but it's very non-specific. The other marker which is coming up in a big way is ischemia modified albumin. Ischemia basically makes albumin incapable of binding to metal ions like cobalt. So it is known as IMA. And some of the preliminary studies are there in which the higher level of IMA was related to gut ischemia. Endothelin damage is a very common problem in ischemia. So endothelin 1 level has been seen to be high in patients with non-obstructive mesenteric ischemia. Epithelial damage markers are in form of intestinal fatty acid binding protein, FABP. Lot of work has been done on this with which has shown high sensitivity and specificity. Unfortunately, all these markers cannot be measured. So traditionally, so what we have in our basket to know, these are the markers: lactate, LDH, TLC, base excess, D-lactate, and now we have procalcitonin available with us, and ischemia modified albumin, if that is available, that is going to help us in future in diagnosing mesenteric ischemia. Lastly, a word about irritable bowel syndrome, a very common clinical condition in which there is no organic pathology which has been seen. We diagnose this particular condition by using Rome criteria, but there is so much of overlap between the symptoms of IBS and inflammatory bowel disease or tuberculosis or microscopic colitis that if we have now we diagnose inflammatory this irritable bowel syndrome by saying that there is no pathology, but we need a marker to say that this particular patient is having IBS. So the positive marker can, if we have a positive marker to say that this is IBS, then this will be of very good use in because this is a very common clinical condition. We now have markers for ruling out IBS, the combination of different markers in form of calprotectin. We have fecal molecules as short chain fatty acid. We have different metabolic compound, volatile organic compounds which can be measured in breath. They all show that this is not IBS, but there is no marker. Again, there is cytolethal distending toxin B. This can be measured to say that this particular person is having bacterial pathogen. We have anti-vinculin antibodies which are there, which can differentiate IBS diarrhea type from IBD. We have breath test for volatile organic material metabolites, so they can say that this particular patient is not having this pathological disease. We have lactulose breath test in which methane production is there, which can predict IBS constipation type, and because this test is positive, because these IBS patients, they have methane producing bacteria, their level is high. So lactulose breath test is positive. So level of methane production is associated with severity of IBS constipation type. So all these markers are there. Thank you.